Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Something that I as a German have heard a lot. So here I am in Auschwitz, the deadliest concentration camp, to learn more about the worst crimes my country has ever committed. May we learn from our past and never forget the million of innocent souls that have died here in the deadliest Nazi concentration camp Auschwitz. The Auschwitz Museum is divided into two parts. Auschwitz I has been built at the beginning. This is where our tour starts. We are in front of the entrance with the famous sign that says Arbeit macht frei. That basically means work sets you free, which obviously was exactly the opposite what has happened here in Auschwitz. Auschwitz has been inaugurated on June 14th in 1940 in an area where there have already been some old abandoned military barracks. And it was meant to be a concentration camp for about 10,000 people. This was a place where they hold prisoners. The people that have been kept prisoners here were working in the concentration camps, but also outside in sub-camps. Those working in the sub-camps and the surroundings had to leave Auschwitz through this entry day by day. The workers have been counted, and the most important thing was that all of them returned. Therefore, wounded workers and even dead workers have always been carried back by the prisoners. The number of people who returned in the evening always had to match the number of people who had left in the morning. When entering Auschwitz I, you will get to know a lot of buildings and learn what they've been used for, how the prisoners lived in Auschwitz I, and learn a lot of shocking facts about the beginning of Auschwitz and how it turned into the deadliest extermination camp. The buildings you will see are in its original state. They have not been changed, only some of the windows had to be renewed. We now entered in one of the barracks, and in that barrack we can actually see how the prisoners used to live. In the first room, we were able to see hay on the floor, and this is where they slept. This was all there was in their room, and obviously they shared it with a lot of people, and they slept on the floor just on a little bit of hay. And here in this barrack, we can see a lot of photographies, and these are the original photos of the prisoners. And on each photography, you can see, first of all, the photo of the person. We can see the name, the number, because every prisoner had a number, and then we can see usually when the person was born, what kind of work he did, when they arrived here in Auschwitz, and also when they died. Some prisoners survived quite a long time, but a lot of them only a few days or weeks. And there were all kinds of prisoners here from different nationalities. At first, Auschwitz has been a concentration camp for prisoners that were meant to be a threat for the German army. And therefore, you can see a lot of photographs here with a triangle, which means that they were from a different nationality. Here, for example, we can see the typical star, the star that marks the Jew. A lot of them have only a triangle, as we can see here in this photograph, for example. And on the triangle you can see a P, which means that this prisoner has been a Polish prisoner. So there was always a letter on it to know from where that prisoner was from. And here in Auschwitz, something that I honestly never knew is that there were also German prisoners. German prisoners lived under the same conditions, and a lot of them also died here. So there were really all kinds of prisoners here at the beginning of Auschwitz. And only later on there were more and more Jews being brought here, and Auschwitz transformed into an extermination camp. The photos only have been taken until 1943. With the amount of prisoners, it was getting too expensive, and besides that, the prisoners kept changing a lot with the low amount of food they were given. They were hardly recognizable anymore. So they stopped taking photos and tattooed a number on the prisoners instead to be able to identify them. We are in front of block 10. In this block they did a lot of experiments, especially the Dr. Karl Klauberg was experimenting here on women. Karl Klauberg, who was a German gynecologist, experimented here on women that were held here in this building. He did a lot of sterilization experiments, and some of the women died from these experiments. Another well-known doctor of Auschwitz is Dr. Josef Mengele, who experienced with kids, especially with twins here in Auschwitz. Whenever one twin died, they murdered the other one as well immediately, so that Dr. Mengele was able to perform autopsies on both twins simultaneously. Here in block 11 there are also a few stories to be told. Here in this pathway behind me there have been executions taking place. In the block 11 itself there have been various prisoners. Down there are various cells that you can visit, but it's not allowed to film there or take pictures. You can see various cells. There is one cell, for example, where they put in prisoners without any light. and there were about 39 prisoners in one cell without light for many days. And there was another one, the cell of hunger. Prisoners have been kept there over various days without being fed anything. And there was one prisoner that actually went there more or less on his own will. He did it to save another prisoner, because prisoners have been selected to go into that cell, and there were obviously a lot of people being scared. There was a prisoner that has been selected and that started to cry. So another prisoner, Maximilian Kolbe, asked on his own will to be exchanged for one of those selected prisoners and to go into that cell in his stead. And that's what happened. He was in that cell of hunger for 14 days without food. He survived it, but he has been executed later on with an injection into his heart. It was also in block number 11 where they started to do the first executions with the gas. This was where they did the first experiments, because at the beginning they didn't really know the quantity they needed and so on. So in block 11 they did the first executions with the gas that later on they have used for the mass executions. In block 4 you can learn a lot about the time when Auschwitz was transformed into an extermination camp. From 1942, people, especially Jews, have been murdered here in Auschwitz, and the mass murder began. A lot of people arrived here in trains. They have been selected right at the time of their arrival. There used to be a doctor that just looked at the people and saw their conditions and decided whether they were able to work or not. Whenever someone was, for example, weak, old children or pregnant women, for example, that were not able to work, those were sentenced to death immediately. They never entered the concentration camp. They went directly to the gas chambers. Obviously, they haven't been told that they were being murdered right away. They have been told that they were able to take a shower. The Jews that arrived here have been taking away all of their belongings. They came with everything they had because they thought this was basically their new home. So they brought everything they had, and all of those personal belongings have been taken away. And here in the Barrack 5 you can see personal belongings of the prisoners. There were, for example, some pots down there because people, as mentioned before, they brought everything they had. But there were also glasses, and there were a lot of prostheses. These people, obviously, who had a disability, they were directly sent to the gas chambers because they weren't of use for the Nazis. The prostheses of these prisoners have been sent to German hospitals, and they were used for example, wounded Nazis. And here in this room, this is actually impressive. This room is full of shoes that belong to the Jews that died in the gas chambers. There are more or less 80,000 pairs of shoes, which sounds like a lot, but really it isn't. If you think about it, there died at least 1,100,000 people here, so 80,000 is just a small number. We are in front of the last remaining crematorium and gas chamber here of Auschwitz. This gas chamber has not been used as a gas chamber ever since 1943. They stopped using it as one because they already had Auschwitz II, which we are going to visit in a little bit, where they created much bigger gas chambers. Here in this one, more or less 340 people have been burned in one day. This one is a tiny one. 340 in comparison to Auschwitz II is a very small number. In Auschwitz-Birkenau, about 2,000 people could enter the gas chambers and 1,500 people were burned in the crematorium. So obviously they were able to burn less people than entered the gas chambers, which is one of the reasons why sometimes they even had to burn bodies outside in front of the gas chambers. Entering this place definitely gives you goosebumps. You can imagine what it must have felt like to enter these dark and ugly places. People had to take off their clothes here in this area behind me. They entered the gas chamber thinking that they were getting a shower in there. It's a completely dark room. There are holes in the roof. These have been closed when the gas entered so that people weren't getting oxygen anymore and died within 15 to 20 minutes. And after that, prisoners here in Auschwitz burned their bodies in the crematorium, which is the second part of this building. Whatever the Nazis could use of the prisoners, they kept. So even before burning the bodies, the Nazis shaved the heads of the prisoners because they used their hair to sew tissues. For example, a part of the army's uniform contained human hair. There is a room in the museum where you can see tons of human hair that has been found in Auschwitz after the war. Besides the hair, whenever a prisoner had gold in their teeth, this has also been taken out before burning the bodies. We are now in Auschwitz II, which is also known as Auschwitz Birkenau. This part has been constructed later on and it was made for 100,000 prisoners. We are at a tower from which you can see the whole concentration camp. Down there you can see the railways where the prisoners actually arrived and have been selected. We are going down now to have a look at the barracks. We can see on the right side a few barracks that have been destroyed. Either they have been destroyed over time or by the Soviets that arrived or by the same Germans that maintained the camp before they left. They destroyed quite a lot of areas here. But on the other side we can see still a lot of barracks that are still in its original state, and we can even enter them and see how people lived inside of them. We just entered one of the barracks here, and there you can see how people lived. They lived under terrible circumstances. First of all, there's little space in there, and up to 400 people lived in one of those barracks. There are bunk beds in there, and each bunk bed has 3 levels. The prisoners slept only on hay. There was no mattress or anything like that. And there were up to 5 people in each level of the bunk bed. There's a heater in the middle. You can see chimneys in each barracks and a heating system in the center of the barrack. But nevertheless, I am here currently in June. It's mid-June. In a few days it's officially summer and I'm here in a jacket. It is pretty cold today, and imagine being here during winter. In winter it can get easily between -15 and -20 degrees, so a lot of people were freezing to death here as well. Others were dying of hunger and others were dying for the lackage of hygiene, because obviously here in those barracks hygiene was a huge problem because it was simply missing. There were lots of people in little space. Sicknesses and diseases spread easily. This here is a barrack where they were able to go to the bathroom and wash their hands and face. There's a part where you can see the toilets. It's basically just a hole. It's nothing with privacy. This was where prisoners had time to go to the bathroom in the morning and in the evening, and they only had a very limited amount of time. So the Nazis here basically controlled everything, even the most basic things. If a prisoner had to go to the bathroom during the day, he had to ask for permission. These kind of barracks that we can see here have been used in Germany as well, but as stables for animals. And well, here in the concentration camps, they were the homes of the people. We are now at the area where the people arrived. You can see the railways here behind me. And this is where the wagons with prisoners arrived. Those who arrived here, they didn't know what was going to happen here. They've heard about concentration camps, they've heard about camps for workers, and that is what they expected here. They expected to come here to work. And even though some of them came here to work, Auschwitz II was also a huge extermination camp for a lot of people. Here in this place, people have been selected by a doctor. Either they were strong enough to keep working, and then they were sent to the right here on this side, where you can see lots of, well, it's ruins of barracks, but people used to work and live in this area. Or those who seemed too weak to be able to work were sent to the left, where there have been 2 big gas chambers. So for a lot of people, this was the place where they arrived and where they were basically sentenced to death. People arrived in trains with cars that weren't made for passengers. They were made for goods. And there were up to 80 people in one of those wagons, so they were scammed into a very little space, and some of them came from very far away, so they spent a lot of time in those tiny wagons. I am standing in front of the ruins of the crematorium number 2. And as you can see, it is completely destroyed. The Germans itself actually destroyed lots of parts, including the gas chambers and the crematoriums, before they left Auschwitz. They already knew they were losing the war and tried to eliminate proof of what they did, of their crimes here in Auschwitz. We are are at the end of the tour through Auschwitz, and in my opinion this was a very interesting visit, one that is quite shocking in some areas and one that really gives you goosebumps. We've done a private tour and I would definitely recommend you to go on a tour. There are group tours that are being offered. I'm going to leave you a link in the description below so that you can check it out and see whether this is something for you or not. But I think without a guide you would miss out on a lot of details here about this place. Now, I personally learned a lot. There were various things that I didn't know so far. I think it is extremely important to keep telling this part of our history, to keep remembering it and to learn from our past. But especially nowadays, I sometimes wonder if we actually learn from our past or not. Because it seems to be impossible for human beings to be free of prejudices about people with other skin colors, with other beliefs and religions, and with other places of origin. Besides that, with everything that is currently going on in our world, it just seems impossible for humanity to live peacefully together. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Did we actually learn from our past or not? I'm curious to hear your thoughts about Auschwitz in general as well. And I hope you've learned something as well during this tour. And I really hope to see you on my future adventures.